Welcome to Literary as FECK, and I am the world's forgotten boy, and he's the one who.
I don't remember the fucking words now.
Really?
And I should. I've listened to the song 8 million times.
You fucked
Uh,
that up.
I'm the one who searches to destroy. There we
Thank
go.
you.
Took me a moment. Um, yes. What are we here to talk about today?
Well,
Uh,
searches to destroy somehow. Um, no, that's not really breaking it. But anyway, so we talk about books on here, as you can probably
yes.
tell, and but every now and again, we read books other than for this format, and
Yes.
we're free to do this as is our want. If Nick wants to bring something up, well, what?
No, I just like the idea that maybe we're not free to read anything other than what we agreed to read upon for this show. And if you found out that I was cheating on you by reading books that we
Oh, I
hadn't.
send round the Fahrenheit 451 police to burn you to death in your bath with a flamethrower.
But anyway, which is what I
Yes,
would be reading. Yeah, you know me well. You know
but
my habit.
every now and again we read extracurricular, and if you
Hmm.
ever feel like doing so, I don't think you've actually done this yet, have you? You haven't actually brought something up.
A book that I've
No,
read. Yeah, no, yeah.
but you are free to do it because I'm going to do it right
Okay.
now. And this
All
is
right.
not going to be a revelation for a lot of people. A lot of people will go, huh, I know about that, but I didn't. So I finally finished reading the Bachman books,
Oh, okay. Yes.
which is not quite all of them. A thinner isn't in here, but
Hmm.
Rage, The Long Walk, Roadwork, and The Running Man.
Rage, which is very hard to find now, hey.
Yes,
Uh,
because it's a school shooting one, right?
yeah, and
Yes,
he himself, Stephen pulled it, basically has pulled it from being published.
yes. And it's good. It's and the thing is, what surprised me is every one of these is pretty much a banger, and among
Hmm.
the finest of Stephen King's works that I've read.
Right.
And they're all pretty grim and angry.
Right. And brisk too. Like they're not the
Yeah,
huge. I mean, it looks like a doorstopper, but that's because it's 4 books or 5 books.
exactly. And
Yeah.
The Running Man is very different from the film.
Yes, I think Mick Fleetwood is probably not in the book.
Not is he's missing. Yes, he's not the leader of the resistance, or whatever the fuck he is in there. But The Long Walk. Have you read The Long Walk? The Long Walk is very good.
No. In
This
fact,
is
I
a
don't know if I read. I might have read the Running Man when I was a teenager, and
right.
I've never read Rage, even though it's been actually recommended to me several times over the years by different people, all of whom whose opinions I respect. So I've always kind of meant to give it a go.
Yeah.
Um,
No, if you can find like a second-hand copy like this of everything in one go, it's. But The Long Walk is particularly good, which is now I was talking to. Turns out our friend, a friend of this parish, Ron Scott, is a
mhm.
long time fan of The Long Walk as well, and they are actually. He was saying like I've never understood why they never turned that one into a film, and apparently
Mhm.
they have now, or they're on the
Okay.
way to do it. Basically, the setup of The Long Walk, and again, it's great. It's never totally explained, but it seems to be some sort of vaguely totalitarian near future or something. And there's just this contest where um, a few dozen teenage boys are forced to walk, and they cannot flag. Like they get these series of warning, like 3 warnings or something, and after the third one, they just get shot, and they have to walk until there's only one left
Wow.
standing. Yeah,
Oh, so weirdly, it's almost like it's like a grimmer version of because it would lack the action in some ways of what the fuck Fukasaku Kinji's, and it's based on a book.
battle royale.
Battle Royale, yes, yeah,
Right.
like a really sad battle royale.
Yeah, it's really good. It's
I
really
like
good.
I would imagine psychologically it would be
Yeah, it's
really.
definitely one of the better things by Stephen King I've ever read. So, of all yeah, The Long Walk is, and The Running Man is a lot of fun as well. Actually, I have to say.
Mhm.
But it's all pretty good. So there we go. I just never got around to it before. Now finally read them all, and yeah, definitely. because I get the feeling that obviously people know about the Bachman books,
Mhm.
but I get the feeling that they're maybe slightly giving short thrift, or like, it's Stephen King not at his best, or there's a
Mhm.
reason they're in or some crap like that. No, no, no. This is really
Mhm.
good stuff. Like, serious in a way, because they are brisk and they don't have that doorstop kind of thing, which is
Yeah.
always been a bit of a bone of contention. I
Yeah.
like a lot of Stephen King's writing, but I somehow I yeah, I don't need 1,000 pages every
Yeah.
time out, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there we go. Anyway, we're not talking about that today,
No,
although we kind
we
of did.
could.
Um, we're talking about actually something totally different.
Mm.
We're talking Looking for the Lost: Journeys Through a Vanishing Japan
Mhm.
by the late Alan Booth. Or
Wait, it's funny.
Booth.
I think that when initially when you recommended the book, I might have read a little bit about it, and at that point, at some part of my brain might have clocked that he had passed away, and then I started reading the book, and I just lost sight of that until the very end, and it's quite a gut punch. It's quite a like
Hmm.
it's yeah, it's really quite a sad ending to the book, and it's I'll get ahead of this. I like this book a lot. Um, for me, it's unquestionably something I would recommend to anyone who's interested in Japan. Um, I have a few caveats, and we'll get to them when we get to them. But yeah, but there was an overwhelming at the end. There was a real sense of wistfulness and kind of sadness that comes with the way the book winds down. Um,
Yes. I should mention as well, I was hoping to have a guest on for this show, but I was unable to get in contact with him. So a friend of Alan's, who's still
right,
knocking around here in Japan, Tim Harris, who's also responsible. So if you know Alan Booth at all, you'd know his other book he wrote before this, The Roads to Sata. So
right.
Alan Booth basically was an
Which I
English
haven't
guy.
read and will definitely read.
Oh, it's great. You love it. You
Yeah.
love it. There's an English guy. Yeah, he died in 1993, very young, 43, and ended up originally going to Japan to study no theater,
Hmm.
right? And
Yes, he has quite a good section of the book about that whole
yeah,
process.
no, it's fascinating. And because what I like about Alan Booth's voice is he's like he's like he comes across as like the working class autodidact in
Mhm.
the land of the pointy head blue noses. Is that a thing?
Mhm.
I just made that up.
Sure.
Do you call people blue noses if they're like a bit um
Hoity.
academic? And yeah,
Yes.
he's
Yeah,
not.
I
He's,
think
he's
sure.
like a proper, like he's as smart as a whip, but
Hmm.
he's very unpretentious
Yes.
and likes his beer,
Yeah.
and
Strong opinions.
yes.
That's the one thing that's always interesting to me about and I don't know if it's like like Westerners who are quite comfortable coming to another country and just making strong claims to oh, this is clearly an example of very trite and meaningless culture versus this. I'm
Hmm.
just like, how exactly do you parse those things when you didn't grow up here and have but not to demean what he's saying. I think a lot of what he says is actually, to me, rang very true. But I wondered how a Japanese reader would respond to some of the generalizations or to some of the
Well, what I like about his approach though is,
authenticity or not.
yeah, what I like about his approach though is I think he would probably be the first person to criticize himself.
Right.
Like I like he's got that perfect balance of like the gut reaction to something, but he's very aware that, well, this is not really my place necessarily, so
Right.
I appreciate that. Again, that comes with there is a definite lack of the hoity-toityness there,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
um So yeah, I'm sure I would have. I'm sure I would have liked Alan if I'd ever met him, but
Hmm.
he was not long for this world. Shortly, and yeah, his mate Tim, like I said, is still knocking around and put out a collection a few years ago, actually, of his newspaper writings. He had like a
Hmm.
film review column, and he did a few other bits and pieces, and he collected them together in a volume that I need to buy actually before it kind of becomes a ridiculously overpriced collector's
Hmm.
item. But yeah, but unfortunately, Tim wasn't able to join us to talk about Alan. It was a shame because I think they were very good friends. Actually, I think they knew
Wow.
each other very well, and I think his death quite affected. Again, I don't want
Yeah.
to speak for him because he's not here, but
Yeah.
I've spoken briefly to him before about Alan because yes, because I had previously read the Roads to Sata book, which yeah, you would, yeah, I mean, you love that book. But
Hmm.
so anyway, so the Rose Sato was him walking from one tip of Honshu to the other, north to south, the main island
Hmm.
of Japan, and basically recording, eh, things he came across the way, and this is pretty much more of the same, really, except
Hmm.
it's not.
He's older here, right? That's one difference is this is him almost returning to
Yes,
another lengthy walking or sets in this case set of lengthy walking
yes.
trips.
So I originally thought that this book was all about him walking around Aomori and Akita prefectures up in the north, which means a lot to me because that's where my missus is from, my in-laws are
Okay.
from. So I've spent an awful lot of time up in Aomori, and that
Hmm.
is, of course, where you will find the Tomb of Christ, and
Yes, of course.
yes, and no, it's a beautiful part of the world and just full of fascinating. I mean, we'll talk about this when he goes to Osamu Dazai's family house, and that
Yeah.
was a real important linchpin for me as well because I've been there, and
Okay.
it's like one of those things where, oh my God, he's nailed it. Like he knows,
Hmm.
so I can trust everything else because
Yes. Yeah.
this bit is
You
right.
got that right. Yeah.
But it turns out it's not just that. That's one third of the book, right? So and then
Hmm.
there's another third when he's in like Miyazaki Kumamoto way,
Hmm.
right? And then another one is Gifu, right?
Yes.
Um, but it's basically, yeah, Alan Booth rocking up in a place, deciding to walk from here to there, stopping in the evening in wherever he can, little
Hmm.
ryokans and stuff, and just chatting to people and getting the
Hmm.
measure of a place. And he does seem to have, I mean, obviously the results are going to vary considerably depending on, you meet a lot of, I mean, there are a lot of people who would do the same thing, but
Hmm.
totally lacking in any sort of insight or
Yes.
powers of observation or
Mm.
but Alan Booth seems to be able to almost effortlessly because there's not much here in a way it is just I started walking in the morning and I met this person and I met that and I went here. There's not really that much kind of he doesn't seem to need to force any sort of he doesn't feel like he's straining to come up with some kind of
The narrative, yeah,
overarching no.
narrative. No, although he does do the thing in the first and second section where there is there's a literary or historical antecedent, right, to each of those walks. So the first one
Yes.
there is Dazai, right? And
Yes.
interesting enough, both of them I realized when I was going back through looking at what I'd flagged or what I'd noted in the book, both of them basically and the second one is Saigo, right? Who's the guy
Yes.
who I guess that they it's when I was reading, I was like, is this the guy that they sort of loosely based the Last Samurai film with Tom Cruise, like the one that Takakura
Ah, yes, yes. Not
or no, sorry,
Takakura.
Watanabe.
Yes.
Watanabe Ken, not Takakura Ken. Yeah, Watanabe Ken. Yeah, and it is apparently that is basically
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
a kind of a composite version of him in that film. But both of these people basically ended up kind of committing suicide in a way, like
Mm.
one very much directly, and then the other more or less doing the same thing by going up against the government, and knowing that there was no way he could win, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So it gets an extra kind of sad little frisson to the end of the book when you realize that, you know, he's I mean he kind of I don't know if this is true or not, but he intimates that he started feeling sick near the end of the trip, right?
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting as well. The first section when it comes to the Desire Summer stuff as well is what's kind of fascinating is like he clearly is
Yeah.
almost semi-reluctantly writing about Desire Summer. Like
Yeah.
he doesn't like
Slightly
it at
annoying.
all, does
Yeah,
he?
yeah. Rich, kind of this rich asshole
Yeah,
who seems to have an
which is
indebted.
absolutely right as well.
Yeah.
And the fascinating thing about if you go and visit Desai Osamu's family's house, because he did come from this trading family, right? Incredibly
Hmm.
well. And you visit the house, which is quite unassuming from the outside. But as soon as you get in there, it's holy fuck, this place is still impressive. Like
Right.
the design of the house is incredible because it's like it's almost like I don't know how it's like almost like puzzle boxes within puzzle boxes or something,
Hmm.
and it's all designed so it can all the sliding doors can open up, and it's this massive space, or it can all be cornered off, and it's
Right.
got different, and it seems like you're in like it's a really impressive fucking house. I mean,
Right.
still now, and yes, and obviously everything around there that little, there's nothing in that town. It's a total Dazai economy town, right?
Right.
Um, but no, if you're ever in the north of Japan, and you should check out Desire Sambas house because it really does. Yeah, you're like it. Ah, okay. So this is yeah, this is the fucking poor me kind of.
Hmm.
He comes from this. Like it
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
gives you a
Yeah.
totally different
Yeah. Um, I was
frame
gonna
of
So
reference.
my images of and I don't know if I'm even right in thinking this, but like there's a couple of Fukusaku Kinji he's come up twice today. That's weird. Some of
He
his
comes up a
Yakuza.
lot whenever you talk about anything, Nick. To be
I
fair,
don't think so. I don't think he
he
does. And you know,
does.
I'm still fucking angry. We talked to Ramsey Campbell. He brought up Lone Wolf and Cub in that Stooges book. I didn't bring it up when talking to him.
You
I
wait
mean, if,
until his monograph on the films of Thomas Milian comes out.
oh
You'll
yes.
be kicking yourself then.
But no, Fukusaku Kinji made at least one, maybe two Yakuza movies that are set in the like super deep, snowy, like Hokuriku Proxy War and
Right.
stuff like that. So, but is Hokuriku anywhere near?
No, I think it's a little further south than it's not quite that north, I don't
Okay.
think.
Well, shit, it's really snowy. So I am assuming that then is it
Yeah, but
equally
then
like?
again, you have to remember the snows start here not about midway up, right? Like you've been on the Shinkansen where you go into a tunnel and it's summer and you come out
Yes.
the other end and it's
What the
fucking
hell?
Narnia. Uh,
This
yeah,
is true.
it
Anyway.
depends on the time of year, but
Right.
no, you go up into the deep north. It's fascinating actually. I've always been fascinated with the north, and clearly Alan Booth is
Mhm.
besotted with it
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, it's an odd one. I love this book. I love the Roads to Sartre.
Hmm.
But I'm not quite sure if I have much at length to say about it beyond. I mean, if you hadn't loved this book, I'd have been very, very surprised, right? Because
Right.
we're both obviously fans of just for some reason something about this country has gone under our skin.
Oh
Right?
yeah.
We also
Yep.
love walking,
Yep.
and we like uh travelogues.
Yep. And just
And
well observed
yes,
of life stuff.
yes. And that's all it is really. So I don't know if I have much to say beyond. I mean, it's just it's a fantastic read. You
Mhm.
get the sense that Alan Booth could almost you could drop him off almost anywhere and he'd write about it in an interesting way, right?
Yes.
But clearly he has that thing that I think we both have, which is that what I really appreciate it's not just a Japanophile. It's not
Mhm.
just a guy banging on about how much he loves Japan. What I like about it is it's a man who's clearly entirely spellbound, but doesn't really know why, and is
Yes.
almost like like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Like, why am
Hmm.
why am I just so fascinated by wandering about the provinces and talking
Hmm.
to, entirely regular
Yes.
folk, nothing remarkable, and going to stay in a little onsen or something. And sometimes even, I mean, it's clearly like a bit shit. Like
Oh, yes.
the
Yeah.
onsen hasn't been cleaned and no one's been here for ages and it's loud
Yep.
and the service is terrible.
Hmm.
But I love it. I love it. And I think if
Yep.
this was back at home, and
Yeah.
I would just complain and moan and I wouldn't find it charming in the least. So is it just this layer of like, why? Like,
Yes.
you can feel he's genuinely conflicted, but he's not. What the fuck? Why am I so? And from the beginning, he comes and he doesn't even like no particularly, as far as I could tell.
Yep.
Like,
Nope.
immediately starts about getting in there and changing it, and but he's still fascinating. And I'm sure I don't want to speak for you, but certainly in my case, I have that now to this day. I'm still here in Tokyo after 25 years, and it's still endlessly and then the rest of the country is fascinating as well. And I go to like cheap, I go to day trips, and the wife does as well, and she is Japanese, so that's a slightly different thing. But yeah, we go to Chiba for the day, and we'll drive around, and it'll be entirely small little things,
Hmm.
but we'll have a entirely satisfying day out. And
Hmm.
you can imagine someone else thinking, these people are fucking nuts. Like, why do they enjoy that
Right.
so much? But we do, and I don't know why either. So yeah, so
There
yeah,
is there
maybe
is
so there's that element where
right.
I can just relate so much to
And
them.
he doesn't shy, which I appreciate. He doesn't shy away at all from what we now, I guess, call the white privilege of it all, right?
No, no,
Uh,
no, no.
he definitely lets you know that like so the various moments where like there's one part I like where he goes in and I think it's a little like sake brewery or something like that, right? And like the Japanese people just before him basically ask, "Is there any chance we could have like a tour?" And they're like, "Oh no, no."
Right.
And as soon as they leave, they're like, "Come on in!"
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So again, this Englishman around, like, "Oh, this what a fucking score!" That we got, like an English guy, and that was 10. I had 10 years of that, and it
Yeah.
is a strange and kind of wonderful. But then also, you'd have these moments I'd be walking around and I'd see like the most homeless person I have ever seen. Every most homeless person I ever saw was in Japan. It was
Right.
in it was down in the station in Yokohama or it was in Shibuya Station, like people who you're like, you know, they should be in a mental hospital. Somebody should be taking care of that guy. He shouldn't, you know, be there. But anyway, and I'd always be like, oh man, like I'm really living this kind of life of like my job is easy and it's way overpaid and I like it. And then so I'm getting off. I'm coming out of work at like 10 o'clock at night, going into Shibuya Station, and I'm just surrounded by people who just look crushed, who are
Mm.
just like their salaryman lives and their office lady lives are just really, I guess, a bummer to them. And I have a shit-eating grin on my face all the time. Like 10 years, I was like, "Da, da, da, this is the greatest place on earth.
Right.
How how are you not?" And then in a way, I got back here and I started to be like, oh yeah, this is kind of what it feels like to be in the grind of your
Real
own
world. Yeah.
world. And then I would sometimes see like tourists from like, or even people who'd moved here from like other places who looked like they were living their best lives. And I was like,
Right.
oh, the novelty and the kind of yeah, there is this kind of,
Yeah, no, no. I have learned, don't you worry, I've learned from the errors of others. I'm not fucking leaving.
you
I'm
kind of
staying
be
put.
barnacled
You're
on
gonna have to
there.
crowbar me out.
Um, but yes, so I can remember going backstage at Super Kabuki,
Right.
and me, I'm like, why am I? I had students who had spent their entire lives wishing to have the experience of being able to be backstage at Kabuki, and me with very little understanding or knowledge of like the yeah, but knowing that I was fiercely privileged because I was having the experience,
Yeah. Oh
right?
no, absolutely. Well, that's the thing as well, though. Is it's funny because I think again wouldn't want to speak for
Hmm.
someone else, but I'm thinking Alan Booth had another extra layer to it as well. Is whereas the thing with you and me is for whatever reason, stupidity, laziness, or whatever, we've got nowhere near the mastery of the language that Alan Booth clearly.
Yes.
He's clearly a
Yes.
man comfortable enough with the language that he can pick up local dialects and stuff as well, right?
Yes. Although
He can
he
clearly.
does foreground that he doesn't actually write in Japanese at one point in the book. He says that
Right,
the articles that are published under his name have been translated
right,
from
right.
the original English by somebody else.
But clearly,
Yes, he could
the,
clearly
the com
speak
yeah, he
fluently.
can
Yeah.
pretty much talk to anyone, right?
And he
Um,
can sing, apparently he can sing any fucking
yes.
you know, folk song you would like him to.
And while I'm like, if I can just do the theme to Hokuto no Ken one time,
Hmm.
all the way through, I will be. Especially that bit where it goes really. I'm not a metal guy, but Hokuto no
Right.
Ken, metal as fuck, man. Anyway,
Yes.
I wonder if 3 Inches of Blood ever did the Hokuto no Ken theme tune. They should think about having a crack at that.
Yeah, who was the Japanese metal band that used to do those epic like Animetal or whatever they were, and they released albums would be 40 songs like just back to back to back to back, and it'd be like, and so one
Right.
was like
Mega
all the
mix at least.
60s 60 like like Grendizer,
Right, right.
all that shit back to back. Anyway, good
Anyway,
albums.
well, that's another fascinating thing as
Yes.
well, because yeah, I was going to say that, but the other thing as well, you just reminded me of. What's fascinating is, in some ways, we're very, very different because I think any of that, um, or some of his film criticism that I read, for example,
Hmm.
that whole um otaku anime trash culture
Hmm.
stuff wouldn't have interested him in
No,
the slightest,
definitely
right?
not.
So there's connections and but then there's other huge gulfs. Like
Yeah.
he'd be Ozo. Don't get me wrong, I love my Ozo as well, but
Hmm.
I think he wouldn't have had the time of day. But what I was going to say is, so in our case, that privilege, because it works two ways. On the one hand, it's like, yes, I'm in a position to be able to do things that local people can't do. But always at the
Oh,
end
yeah.
of the
I
day,
think my wife had lunch with a princess, like
right,
Princess Takamatsu, yeah, because she ran this English speaking competition, and girls from my wife's school would inevitably end up winning prizes, and so yeah, she twice, I believe, had lunch with the royal
right,
family.
right. But at the same time, there is that slightly short leash of the pet gaijin, right? You're always
Yes,
kind of slightly aware that, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, you had, and don't get, and not no complaints at all. You're getting to have you're getting access to places that other people don't.
yep.
But
It's
just
on sufferance.
don't shit on the floor,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
Yes, you're
Kind
there
of
on
thing.
sufferance.
But what I was going to say is, in for people like you, morons like you and me,
Hmm.
that's fine. We
Yes.
would never get anywhere near running up to the it's to the edge of it. But you can imagine where someone like Alan Booth, maybe he would, yeah, someone would, he'd have a nice conversation with someone, or whatever, and then at a certain point, because it's not like talking to a moron like it is to us in Japanese, and we speak caveman Japanese,
Hmm.
and you can imagine at a certain point, um, like he'd feel that glass ceiling
Yes.
more,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Um, so that's a slightly different kind of take on it, right?
I always found that fascinating. So when, because I worked in basically like the as a drudge in the eikaiwa business, right? So like
Mm.
which if you don't live in Japan or haven't you don't know much about it, basically English language schools that are, mostly frequented by kids and kind of grannies, right? And your job is to teach English, but basically to be an entertaining kind of, slightly buffoonish figure. And but so I had friends, I had friends who started out there and they were desperate to like break that out of that kind of thing. They were like, I want to, I'm going to get my Japanese to a point where I can go be a salaryman. And some of them succeeded. And I was like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you're a salaryman. Like, they were just as miserable as everyone else who was a salaryman. Like, they were coming home at like 12 o'clock at night on the train with a face like a bag of smashed assholes and like being forced to go out and socialize after work with their bosses and like, all this stuff that was completely off of my plate because I wasn't held to those salaryman expectations, right? And I remember just being like, wow, you worked really, really hard to leave a pretty cushy job. And it was purely based on this feeling of like, oh, well, this is like, this is not real adult life. I want to go be an adult. And I could never understand that at all. I was like, why would you want that?
Yeah. Yeah, it is that weird thing, isn't it? And like the more, and this is definitely true. There is that thing of like, if you keep hearing people, uh, what's the word? Compliment. If you keep hearing people complimenting your Japanese, that means your Japanese is still shit.
Yes, of course.
I've noticed that like the better you get,
yes,
the compliments die away, right?
Yes.
It's only when you can
Or if
hardly say
anything,
anything, people are like, "Joe's this
who's
name?"
this name? Yeah, yeah.
And then the more you're like, "No, that
No, and
goes
if you reach a
right away."
certain point of fluency, I think it just freaks people out. I think people
Yeah,
are
that's true.
uncomfortable.
That's
They're
another
like,
thing. Yeah.
they're like,
But anyway,
eh?
we are slightly in danger of allowing it's just to swamp this. We're talking about this book. We're talking about
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
um
Yes. I
yeah,
do have notes. I mean, there are a few things I wouldn't mind
go for it.
digging into
Stage is
here.
yours.
Okay. At one point, he's talking about how rice planters are sold up north, and he's versus how they're sold in Tokyo. And he said in Tokyo they're sold with like some actor who was famous. I wondered who it was because he doesn't name them, but who was an actor who was famous for playing like yakuza bosses, getting out of this rice planter and slapping it on the side, and it like showing that it was really tough. But up north, where people are actually like buying them, it was like a bunch of like it says here. In Tsugaru, on the other hand, the mechanical rice planter is the center of a tableau vivant involving three excited young ladies in latex body stockings who turn their backs to us and
Oh
bend
yes.
towards the machinery so that the camera can close in on their tight, shiny bottoms. It is difficult to say how this image might affect the climate of investment at the Tokyo Stock Exchange, but on rural rice farmers, its effect is electric. Um, I'd like to see that ad.
Yeah, you do wonder what Alan Booth would have made of he was around long enough to see but you wonder what he would have
Yes.
made of AKB-48 or something like that.
Right. Yeah, he does mention at one point of the book, he does mention going to a ryokan or whatever, where it's he's asked, is it okay if he stays in like in an off like a building off to the side, which will be full of high school girls who are there on a trip, and he's like, that will be fine. Um, and then he mentions the frilly lizard boom, which is
Oh
a fascinating
yes, yes.
apparently a period of time in Japan where everyone bought frilly lizards.
I guess it precursor to the Beetle boom.
Yes, yeah. And then obviously he talks a little bit about the migration of which is, I mean, and this is like he's really at the beginning of that, right? In a way, the migration of people from the countryside to the big cities and the kind of that hollowing out of rural Japan, which
Mm, mm.
Obviously
Well,
I
that's the
assume
kind of overall theme. That's why it's called Looking for the Vanishing Japan, right? That's the yeah.
right.
But it's interesting how that's being quite tenacious because like some of the places he talks about far up north, for example, stuff I'm familiar with, that
Mhm.
rang very true to me. Those places are kind of still there, like
Still hanging on.
or there's some of them still there. I mean, I don't know how much longer they will be there, but
Right.
the remnants are you can still find some of this stuff. Like it didn't seem to me like I was reading some of this stuff, it didn't seem like, oh, I missed out on that. Like, oh
Yes.
yeah, no, that's kind of I've experienced that's kind of still not
Hmm.
quite as much maybe or on the way out, but yeah, still just about holding in there.
Hang on. Um, he mentioned I had forgotten about pizza toast until it came up here. Like, it was a decade back in Canada, and I had forgotten that pizza toast is a thing
Oh,
that you could get.
you mentioned now I hadn't even occurred to me. Oh yeah, of course that's not a thing you get everywhere, right?
No,
I
no,
assumed it was.
I haven't seen
Yeah.
it since I left Japan, and
Wow, okay. It's such a good
I
idea.
forgot.
It's simple. It's yeah.
Um, oh yes, there's a great little part about he goes to a wedding where this older American guy is marrying a much younger
Oh
Japanese
yes,
girl.
yes.
Yes, and then some angry guest stands up and says, "Well, what a splendid foreigner you are." The president rasped into the microphone while several hundred guests stood staring at the tablecloths and clutching glasses of Suntory Nouveau. And what a very impressive uniform. And yes, what a sword. Well, well, a splendid foreigner. I've been wondering, how old are you? Still, never mind. Let's greet the era of international marriage. Yes, indeed. Foreigners coming over here and marrying Japanese girls and sometimes not marrying them. How times change, how customs differ. I wish you happiness, Kampai. I
Classic passive aggressive there.
totally yes. That rang very very true, and also, but he's not wrong either. Like,
No, no, no,
yeah,
no.
you know, um, like good for you. I've told you a story before. I won't repeat it here, but I had somebody who gave an astonishing speech at a wedding that I attended, where they confessed their love for the bride at the wedding in English, and the entire crowd was completely oblivious except for me and Jen, my wife, both of whom were just like, "What the fuck is happening?" Including the groom, who was my friend, who was not listening because he was just
Okay.
staring off into space.
Maybe he's watching this show. Maybe
Maybe he
the
is.
the yen will drop.
There's a section of the book we talked again about like the potential privileges of being an outsider, where he gets to go on, is it Namahage? It's like that thing where it's in that section set in the north where basically I remember reading about it when I lived in Japan and maybe even seeing video of it where like men dress up as these kind of demons and go around and terrorize
Oh
like
yes, yes.
right. And yeah, basically because he's this big, gangly, tall Englishman, they're like, yeah, you'll do, you'll be perfect. And then basically you have to be plied with alcohol to kind of, so he goes from house to house, getting progressively drunker and drunker.
Yeah, he
Um,
even falls asleep in one, but
yeah, in
just
somebody's house, and it turns
falls
out to be
asleep
like the
for a
local
while.
police, like the local police chief's house. Um, and yeah, I don't know. It's just there was so many little moments that reminded me of specific,
Yeah,
places
and it all
that,
rings totally true as well, doesn't it? Like,
yeah, yeah.
um, what I mean is, I think if someone is looking for some, even though it's kind of written by an outsider to a certain extent, but if someone's looking for, um, you know, about Japan beyond the obvious things, I mean,
Right.
Alan Booth's a very reliable guide in that way. Like
Hmm.
you will, yeah, it's a trustable.
Hmm.
He's a reliable narrator, and when he's not, he'll tell you he's not. So
Yes. Yeah. And actually, so we talked about this earlier, and I think this is a really nice moment in the book of that kind of self-knowingness. That's a fucking thing. It's the part where he has this kind of argument with this elderly mama-san about like he's translated some lines from some chopstick
oh
thing,
yes,
and he's
yes.
convinced that there's this kind of mystical or
Oh,
supernatural
that's
element.
brilliant. Yeah.
And then she's not having any of it. She's like, no, it's about just a regular marriage. And he
Yes.
keeps trying to like prod her, and then finally
Yeah.
he's kind of
Those aren't
gets
ghosts, so
angry.
they're just lanterns or something. Or
Yes,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And then finally, yeah, yeah.
And yeah, it's great. And what I like, or what I really like about it, is it finally he's like begrudgingly, yeah, you're right, but fuck you. Like
Yeah, basically, yeah. For taking the
he,
magic
he
away.
hates that he's wrong, but he's wrong, right? No,
Yes, yeah.
actually, that's you've hit the nail on the head because that's a perfect example of the tone here
Hmm.
of what he gets, and it's a rare. I think it's a rare one. There's not many writers that I can think of writing about Japan who so perfectly have that balance of enough insight, but also not losing sight of the fact, yeah, that you're not a local, right?
Yes.
And you never will be, but also in some ways that gives you a bit more, like they say, the
Yeah.
spectator sees more the game kind of thing.
Yes, yes. The outsider position has been my default position since I was 13. In
Right.
a way. Since my family left Ireland, I've always been kind of in some way on the outs of wherever I've lived, you know.
Hmm.
And it's not a bad place to be, I don't think.
No, 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 no. Um,
Um, and there's another part that I really like where he's walking up some mountain in the middle of a because that's another thing that he does do a good job of describing like the kind of misery of like stinging thighs like as you like struggle up a mountain in the blinding typhoon rain, you know, your
hmm,
jeans chafing the whole way. But there's one scene where like it's a particularly shit that like he's lost the trail, he's on this mountain, the rain is, you know, blinding him and he finds this shack with
yes,
these dudes in it who are like have come from like some university or whatever, and the local guide is there. I
right.
can't remember what they're doing up there, but like just the fact that no one is particularly thrown by the fact that oh, there's this gangling Englishman up here also, and they invite him in. They're like, "Would you like some cold mugi cha?" And he's like, "Yes." They sit around in this miserable fucking shack, and I'm like, yeah, that seems weirdly believable to me. Like I have no question that
And the
there is a
local guide's rubbish as well,
no,
right? Like,
he's terrible.
doesn't
Yeah,
know anything about,
anything.
yeah. And that's another thing you come across as well, because, yeah, it's an interesting, there is that remnant here of the, like, um, rather than a meritocracy, it's when it's someone's turn. Like, oh, he's old enough now, so he now
Yes.
becomes the
The
chacho or
default.
whatever, regardless
Right.
of whether he's actually total crap at his job or not.
Right.
And also to not show up that person, right, by
Yeah.
knowing more than them. Like that's a
Yep.
major fault, regardless of whether you're right or not.
Yep.
It's just not the you're
Not
not
the done
supposed to do
thing.
that, right?
Yes.
But sometimes, yeah, you do kind of there's that kind of person that's so fucking useless. And I've encountered this before that you keep accidentally making them look and you're like,
Bad.
dude, I'm not trying to do this, but you're so shit.
So, you're
Like
so
I
inept.
can't help. There was a guy when I haven't seen him for a while. There's a guy Saigen when we were doing Saigen dramas. There was a guy in the crew. We referred to him as Twitchy Fuck, and
Yeah.
because he was very twitchy, and he was like in his 50s or something, and had just never. And that's really hard to not get promoted in Japan, right?
Yeah.
Kind of because But this guy was still running around doing,
Menial stuff.
like, everyone else was like in their early 20s, like out of university doing, and they all just shot past him, right?
Yeah.
Because he was so bad. Like he was terrible. Like I remember we did one job and we were meeting in Shibuya like 6 a.m. We all got in the location bus and we are supposed to drive off to like Saitama or something or Chiba, like a 2 hour drive, to the location or whatever. And more than once, this guy allowed the fucking location bus to go off without the people on it who were supposed to be. So it was like halfway there and it had to come all the way back. And he was
Yeah.
all, oh, and you're like, fucking, what is wrong with you? Like, he was, but he never got fired, because they just won't fire people. But he
Right.
was so shit. It was like, yeah, it was
You have to
amazing.
imagine there was some sort of cognitive thing going on there, you'd imagine.
Oh no,
Like
it wasn't like, no, it wasn't.
slow on the uptake in some
No, no, no,
way.
no. He wasn't like in some way impaired, if
Okay.
he was like, no, he was just a thicko. Like, there's a
Oh.
fine line sometimes, right?
Another part that I wanted to know more about was he mentions that there was like a very well-known novelist who earned more than an office worker earns in a year to spend 5 seconds composing a two-word slogan used by the
All right. Yes.
Exotiku Japan, the exotic Japan. Who do you know who that was?
No, I don't. No,
Who was this
no.
novel to? Um, hmm.
But anyway, not to
Yeah,
cut
yeah,
you
yeah,
short.
yeah.
I mean,
Nope,
if you
nope.
if you do
I think we're
have
good. I think
another
we're good.
anecdote or two, you have a few minutes. But I actually have to get going, unfortunately.
You have to walk from one tip of Japan to
I
the.
do. Yeah.
All right.
Time's a waste, and um,
Okay.
I would actually love to do that as well.
Yes.
I would
Yes.
love to do that.
Yeah. Is that, are we going to retire into that?
Could do,
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
do.
We need a third stooge though. We need I don't know who, but we need a
I've
I
got
feel like
some.
you're more of a
I've
Mo
got
though.
some. I've got
I feel like
some.
you've got more of the Mo energy maybe than yeah. So we need a curly maybe.
Um,
Let's take Ron, fuck. The three of us can go walk from one tip of Japan to the other and see if we don't fucking murder each other by the second in we get to.
a
Yes.
fine read.
Strongly recommended, and I am going to follow up and read
Rose of
the
Thought. Yeah, and you can do as I did with the Bachman books this time. If you do end up reading it, and
yeah, I'll bring it up next
yeah,
at a future date.
because it is actually it's in a way it's even better, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
Um,
right.
right. Until next time, then.
Mm-hmm.
Cheery Bob.
Sayonara.